All right, brothers and sisters, to introduce Brother Johnny's class today, we're going to go to Psalm 137 and read that. So Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, even to the foundations thereof. O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dashes thy little ones against the stones. This is Winfield Bible School 2023. Speaking brother this afternoon is Brother Joni Manell. Title for his series is The Difference Was Daniel. This is his third class, and the title of his class is Before Rulers and Kings. Brother Joni.
Thanks, Simon. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so now we take a different turn a little bit today, and I want us to spend a little bit of time in Daniel's presence today. And my intention, certainly by the time we finish our last session tomorrow, is that you are in love with this man, right? If you aren't already, of course. And I mean in a deeply spiritual way. This man is one of the, for me personally anyway, one of the richest characters we meet in Scripture. And I want to share with you a little bit today, brothers and sisters, that I think he was a man internationally known and respected and regarded as, one of the chief government ministers, of one of the world's greatest empires. Right? Let's not underestimate that. And just as we read that psalm together that Simon just read, I imagine, can you imagine the sentiments of some of those captives, brothers and sisters, as they reflected on their time in Babylon, where we sat down and we wept when we remembered Zion. And there, those that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they wasted us. Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. Isn't that a lovely song? And I think it captures, perhaps, brothers and sisters, the essence of some of Daniel's sentiments. Well, come with me to Daniel chapter 1. And we mentioned earlier in the week that one of the things that had singled Daniel out, along with his friends, was his existing skill and experience and capability to enter Nebuchadnezzar's training program. So in Daniel chapter 1 and verse 4, well, let's pick it up in verse 3. The king spoke unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he would bring certain of the children of Israel and of the king's seed and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish. I don't know what that meant. You have to work out what you think that means. But well-favored, skillful in all wisdom, cunning in knowledge, and understanding science. Not sure how many times the word science appears in the Bible. And such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. I mean, that's quite a job description, isn't it? I want you to find me a group of boys Bearing in mind these were probably young men, a lot younger than me, and they needed to be skillful in wisdom, cunning in knowledge. They had to have an understanding of science, and they had to know how to handle themselves in the king's palace, and an aptitude for languages. Right? That's quite a list, isn't it? And you imagine Daniel demonstrating his understanding of science. Right? What do you do with that at that age? And like I put it to you last night, brothers and sisters, the Jews, for various reasons, had to have a pretty good understanding of certainly the natural world and the order of things. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar was looking for, and Daniel was singled out. He knew how to handle himself. He'd maybe grown up in the courts of Judah anyway with Josiah and his children, and was familiar. He understood the etiquette. He knew how to speak, knew how not to speak, knew how to handle himself, knew his please and thank yous. You know, he was a good boy. And he was selected, therefore, to enter this training program. And I want you to notice what begins to happen here, brothers and sisters. In verse 8, when we're told that Daniel decided he wasn't going to defile himself with the king's meat, Daniel has a challenge. He has to find somebody who he can persuade to let him take this test of not eating the king's meat. And I want you to notice how he does it, verse 9. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. Now, isn't that beautiful? The prince of the eunuchs had already fallen in love with this man, right? He had a deep respect and regard for Daniel. There was something about this man that stood him out as being different, and he loved him. So much so, in verse 10 there, when the prince of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who's appointed your meat and your drink. Why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your own age? So you will endanger my head to the king. You're asking me, he said, to put my life on the line, because I'm supposed to make sure by the time you finish this program, you're the best looking, in the best shape, best brain, best body, best everything. And if you haven't got any of those things, it will be my head that gets chopped off. And Daniel agreed with him, and he was willing to put his life on the line, brothers and sisters, for this young man, because he loved him, and he believed him, and Daniel had convinced him so much that his God was with him. I don't know if you've ever met, a young person like that who just exudes that kind of passion and conviction and energy. It's a bit like David. Do you remember when David stood before King Saul? Never fought anybody, let alone a giant. And he stood there and he said, I killed a lion and a bear, and this Philistine will be like one of them. And Saul said, okay, off you go. And here is Daniel. You just give me this chance, he says to the prince of the eunuchs, and I promise you, you won't lose your head. And this man put his life in his hands for Daniel's sake. Because he loved him. Well, when you come down, brothers and sisters, to the end of Daniel chapter 2, where we finished yesterday, at the end of having explained to Nebuchadnezzar this extraordinary dream that Nebuchadnezzar has had, Nebuchadnezzar gave, as we've discussed, Daniel a position. The king made Daniel, verse 48, a great man, gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. And Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. And I see no reason to suggest, brothers and sisters, that Daniel didn't occupy that position for at least the next 50 years. I didn't see any evidence that Daniel ever stepped down from that role. And we'll see a little later, he was still in high office the night when Babylon fell. So can you imagine that, brothers and sisters? Some of you will have had longer careers than others. Some of you will have had different work experiences. Can you imagine life, working life, reflecting on your career, working for one of the craziest despotic emperors that's ever walked the planet? Yeah, he thought he could make himself like God. And Daniel spent 50 years sat in the gate of the king. And in fact, notice his job title there. He was, Daniel sat in the gate of the king, and in the end of verse 48, he made Daniel ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief of the governors over all the wise men. Not just chief of the wise men, chief of the governors over all the wise men. This is a man with a seriously high office in Babylonian politics. Can you imagine the conversations, brothers and sisters, that would have taken place in Nebuchadnezzar's office? You know, as the commander-in-chiefs all sat around the board table and discussed strategy and talked about issues and what to do and how to do it. And Daniel was there at the table. When people were giving advice, Nebuchadnezzar would turn to Daniel and he would say, "What do you think?" And he would give his opinion, right? For 50 years. You imagine the kind of conversations Daniel could have had with Nebuchadnezzar about the truth and about what really mattered and about how the universe really worked, when you've got all that time sat alongside in the confidence of a man like that. And I want to take you to a couple of hints, brothers and sisters, that Daniel had pretty significant influence over the king and over the affairs of Babylon. So keep a finger in Daniel. Come with me to Jeremiah 39. This is a lovely one. Auntie Lois's favourite, I think. Extraordinary moment this in Jeremiah 39 when Nebuchadnezzar sends his army for the final ransacking of Jerusalem. If you can imagine that, and Daniel presiding over the plans to dispatch the army back to Judah and to complete the siege and to destroy God's temple. And Daniel would have explained to Nebuchadnezzar, wouldn't he, how it would break his heart to know that was going to take place. But it had to be done. God had foretold and prophesied that it would be done. And not only that, he'd foretold and prophesied that Nebuchadnezzar would be the one to do it. And Nebuchadnezzar sent his army to do it. However, we're given this fascinating detail here in verse 11 of Jeremiah 39. Now Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, gave charge concerning Jeremiah to Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, saying, "Take him and look well to him, and do him no harm, but do unto him even as he will say unto you." Now, that's a fascinating thing, isn't it? What on earth has Nebuchadnezzar got an interest in Jeremiah for? Jeremiah's an old man living in Judah. He's an old prophet. You know, he has nothing. He's no wealth, no value, no importance. Even the king of Judah, actually, has spent most of the last few years mocking and deriding him. But Nebuchadnezzar gave specific instructions to the captain of his guard, and he said, when you arrive in Jerusalem, before you destroy everything, there's one person I want you to find, and it's Jeremiah the prophet, right? Now notice how seriously Nebuzaradan took his commission. So verse 13, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, sent. Now what would you have done if you were Nebuzaradan? You've got a city to destroy. You've got a temple to pillage. You've got all this stuff to bring back. You've got hordes of people and captives to oversee, and it's a huge military operation. The last thing that Nebuzaradan needed was an old prophet he had to go and dig out of somewhere and start faffing around with. So what would you have done if you were the Nebuzaradan? You'd have sent the T-boy or something, wouldn't you? You'd have sent some, I don't know, just go and see if you can find that old guy that Nebuchadnezzar was on about, would you? And just, I don't know, do what you can. They're in the middle of a war here. Nebuzaradan didn't do that. Verse 13, so Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, sent and Nebushashban, Rabsaris, Nergal-Sharezer, Rabmag, and the king of Babylon's princes. Even they sent and took Jeremiah out of the court of the prison and committed him to Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, that he should carry him home. And so he dwelt among the people. Isn't that amazing? Can you imagine, brothers and sisters, if you'd have been in the court of Judah, if you'd have been the prison guard looking after Jeremiah, right? The man who had been of no interest to the men of Judah at all. They chucked him in the pit, do you remember? And one day they hear the clinking down the streets, of the Babylonians, and they come knocking on the door. We're looking for Jeremiah. And I suspect the prison guard thought it was because they wanted to take his head off. It wasn't because they wanted to take his head off. For some reason, brothers and sisters, Nebuchadnezzar wanted Jeremiah. And you do the maths and put two and two together, and it seems to me, and I believe, brothers and sisters, Daniel would have given his right arm to have had Jeremiah in Babylon. Can you imagine? There was no Bible school for Daniel, right? There was no Bible class in Babylon. There was no ecclesia in Babylon. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego even disappear off the scene after chapter 3 and are never mentioned again, right? Daniel doesn't live down by the river where Ezekiel is and all the others, right? No mention of anybody else. He's a eunuch. Can you imagine what Daniel would have given to have sat and pored over his scrolls and his documents with Jeremiah, eh? And I imagine as Nebuzaradan set off from Babylon and Daniel nudged Nebuchadnezzar in the ribs and said, you make sure this guy gets his commission, right? I have a very special instruction here. Go and fetch Jeremiah. And all credit to Jeremiah, eh? And the offer was, whatever you want, we'll do it. If you want us to put you on a stretcher and take you back to Babylon, we'll do it. If you want to stay here, we'll do it. And Jeremiah decided to stay there in Judah, so they carried him home, and he dwelt among the people. Well, come with me to Ezekiel this time, brothers and sisters. Ezekiel 28. This is a fascinating little prophecy. This is a prophecy against the prince of Tyre that Ezekiel was told to write and send. I don't know whether these letters ever got there. They were partially for the witness of the Jews as well, of course. But nonetheless, these letters were written to these various nations. And listen to this one that was written to the prince of Tyre. The word of the Lord came unto me, verse 1, next, Ezekiel 28. Son of man, saying to the prince of Tyre, thus says the Lord God, because your heart is lifted up, and you have said, I am a God. I sit in the seat of God. Here's another one who thought he was of this ilk. In the midst of the seas, yet though you are a man and not God, though you set your heart as the heart of God, behold, you are wiser than Daniel? There is no secret they can hide from you. With your wisdom and with your understanding you have gotten riches and gold and silver and treasures. By your great wisdom and traffic have you increased your riches, and your heart is lifted up because of them, and so on, and there you go. But here was this prophecy written to the prince of Tyre, and it doesn't come across so well in the English here, but this is a joke. This is a taunt. You think you're so smart, do you? Just like Nebuchadnezzar did. Are you smarter than Daniel? Do you know more than he? There's no secrets hidden from him. Are there any hidden from you? Can you tell the future? Can you interpret dreams? You can't do that, can you? Daniel can do that. You can't do that. Now, why on earth would that mean anything, brothers and sisters, to the prince of Tyre? And I tell you the reason, because everybody knew Daniel. It was the job of governments to know who was around, right? Who's advising the kings and who's steering policy and so on. Foreign policy, particularly at this time. And Daniel, everybody knew Daniel. Are you wiser than Daniel? Are you smarter than he? Can you work out the secrets that he can work out? And the inference almost, brothers and sisters, is that one of the secrets to Babylon's success is Daniel. Because he's the one, right, who knows what's going on. He can put the jigsaw together. And you haven't got a Daniel, have you? That's what it seems to be saying here, right? And at the very least, that everybody knew Daniel and respected him. He was an international statesman, brothers and sisters. And this is a joke that the king of Tyre is nowhere near as clever as Daniel, who knows all secrets. Well, come back to Daniel chapter 2 and verse 48 here. And let's have a quick look at Daniel's job description. Just for a second, and imagine this. Daniel 2 verse 48, where we were a minute ago. The king made Daniel a great man, gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, chief of the governors over all the wise men. And in fact, I just to entertain your senses, I imagine what the plaque would have looked like outside Daniel's office door, right? And I've just taken this right out of Scripture. This is what it said. Ruler over the prince of Babylon, chief of the governors over all the wise men. And I want you to imagine what Daniel's schedule looked like, when he looked in his diary. What have we got today? Oh, here we go. Right, well, his job title changed a little bit over the years. By the time you get to chapters 4 and 5, it's had a few things added on, right? So he's now also master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. I wonder what you would do, arranging brethren, if you had a young brother come to join your ecclesia and you asked him what he did for a living, and he said, I'm the head of the soothsayers. My job is to monitor the magicians and so on, the astrologers. Can you imagine, brothers and sisters, what Daniel would do when he looked down on his meeting list for Monday morning? Oh boy, I've got the faculty of the soothsayers today. Here we go, right? But I think there's some evidence, brothers and sisters, that during Daniel's tenure, he changed the tone of the Babylonian university. And I'll show you why I think that in a second. And do you know why universities are called universities? It's kind of an irony now. Who was it that started universities? The oldest universities. Anybody know what the oldest university in the world is? I think it's probably one of the English ones, of course. Yeah, well, I mean, that's still around today. Yes, you're right, Bill, of course. But our modern day universities were started by the Christian men, right? Which is why if you ever go to Oxford and Cambridge, very beautiful cities to visit, by the way, the colleges there of the university typically have biblical references, right? Sadly, some of them are a bit dodgy, like Trinity College and so on, but there you go. And they were started by God-fearing men who believed that they believed in one God, they believed in a universe, and that there was value in studying it and getting a deeper understanding and appreciation of it, right? The irony is we still call them universities today, but they're really diversities, right? They're not universities at all. The irony is that there's no longer a belief in one God who is the master of the universe, that by studying him and getting to know him and delving deeply into his creation, will you gain a deeper appreciation of him, right? But I believe that's the approach Daniel took in Babylon. And as he challenged these astrologers and astronomers and soothsayers and magicians to really dig deep and look into the world, right, and find out what was really going on. And if you imagine, we thought yesterday about astronomy and the importance of mathematics. You imagine Daniel's job as ruler over the province of Babylon. He has 120 provinces, extending over a large part of the then known world geographically. Multiple languages, multiple time zones, and there is no standard calendar, there is no standard language, there is no standard process. And one of the things, as I mentioned last night, we know that came out of this Babylonian era was a high level of comprehension of maths and of astronomy and calculations and time. And I put it to you, brothers and sisters, what Daniel got these men doing was working out how to organize themselves, as a good Jew would, right? Get yourself sorted. We need processes. We need organization. If I've got 120 provinces, we need to have a uniform method of working out what month it is, what day of the week it is, what day of the year it is. I want to know when the taxes are coming in. Do you remember the reason Darius placed Daniel over all the 120 provinces? Because when Daniel was over the books, he would suffer no damage. And the way you suffer no damage is in every single province. Everybody had to know what day you declare your accounts. I want everything in. I want it transparent. I want it all done the same. This was Daniel, ruler over the province of Babylon. And he was a man who knew how to do that because he could monitor the stars. He understood how to plan for seasons. And he would make sure the whole province of Babylon was working to the same time scale, the same order, the same pattern, and to get that job done. Now, when you come to Daniel chapter 4, I want you to notice how different things are by the time Nebuchadnezzar's second dream is provided to him. Daniel chapter 4 and verse 4. Some really big differences here, and see if you can spot them from Daniel chapter 2. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house, flourishing in my palace, and I saw a dream which made me afraid. And the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore I made a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. Then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers, and I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But at the last, Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and before him I told the dream. Now, this is a really different scenario to the one we found ourselves in chapter 2, isn't it? There was a reason, brothers and sisters, wasn't there, when Nebuchadnezzar had his dream in chapter 2, he refused to tell them what it was. What was the reason? Nebuchadnezzar didn't trust them one bit, did he? Even though it was his own university and his own wise men, he knew if he told them to interpret his dream, they would give him any old rubbish to make sure they wouldn't have their heads chopped off. And so to make sure he got a genuine response, he was like, no, you tell me the dream. And you can understand why the wise men of Babylon says, no, you tell us the dream, Nebuchadnezzar, and we'll give you the interpretation. And I mean, that's nuts, isn't it? I could have done that. If somebody holds a gun to your head and says, can you please interpret my dream? I could have done that, no problem. Okay? And Nebuchadnezzar said, no, I know how you guys work. And this is Nebuchadnezzar's own men. Notice how different it is here. I made a decree to bring in all the wise men before me, verse 6, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of my dream. No holding back. Nebuchadnezzar told him his dream. So that's the first big difference. The second big difference is the wise men say, we don't know. There was no, okay, I'll have a go. Okay, interesting. Next. Okay, I think it means this. There was none of that. Their answer was, Nebuchadnezzar, we don't know. Now, things have changed around here, right? Now, the third thing that happens is when they say they don't know, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't say, all right then, I'm going to kill you all. There's a massive cultural change, brothers and sisters, that's taken place in this university. Nebuchadnezzar is open. People act with integrity. They don't make it up when they don't know the answer. They say, and if they say they don't know, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't cut their heads off, right? Progress has been made. Daniel's had an influence. And now this is a different place to live and to work and to occupy yourself. And there is trust and there is morality and there is integrity in this place. And when the back's really against the wall and the chips are really down, then bring Daniel in and he will solve the problem. This is what we do. And so in comes Daniel to answer the problem. Come down to verse 18. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen, and now thou, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation thereof. For as much as all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation, you are able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Isn't that lovely? And Nebuchadnezzar knew that when everybody else failed, Daniel would not. Isn't that lovely? Has absolute confidence in him because Daniel now is in charge of all these men. And it's interesting, this is the only chapter, in fact, where Daniel's Chaldean name is used quite extensively, Belteshazzar, although you still get this lovely hint here of verse 19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar. I think the only reason you get Belteshazzar mentioned repeatedly here in this chapter is so unique in Scripture in that it's inspired and written by Nebuchadnezzar himself. And so he uses here Daniel's Chaldean name. Well, the funny thing is, brothers and sisters, if you just keep a finger in Daniel and come back with me to Isaiah 14, this vision that Daniel now has to interpret is one that Daniel's been waiting for, I think, for a long time. So Isaiah 14 was the chapter we read to kick off our week on Sunday. And do you remember the vision here that was given in Isaiah 14? Verse 4, you will take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how has the oppressor ceased, the golden city ceased? The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, that ruled the nations in anger, is persecuted and none hinders. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Yea, the fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since you were laid down, no feller is come up against us. Hell from beneath is moved for you, to meet you at your coming. It stirs up the dead for you, even all the chief ones of the earth. It has raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. And it talks about the pomp and the majesty of Babylon coming down and being brought down. And Daniel has been waiting for this vision to become a reality, and now here it is. And of course the dream in Daniel chapter 4 was that in verse 11, Nebuchadnezzar saw a tree great and strong, whose height reached up to heaven, but now it is to be cut down to the earth, and a band of iron left there around the stump of the roots. And now this vision that Daniel knew well, it was written well over 100 years before, has now become a reality, and he's now standing in front of this man and realizing that this vision from Isaiah 14 has now been given to Nebuchadnezzar himself, and his time has come to be disciplined and to be brought low by God himself. And I want you to notice, brothers and sisters, in Daniel 4, if you just come back there, how Daniel feels and reacts when he sees this vision and how he speaks to Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel, verse 19, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for a whole hour, and his thoughts troubled him. And listen to how Nebuchadnezzar speaks to him. This isn't the crazy emperor anymore, yeah? The king said, verse 19, Belteshazzar, let not the dream or its interpretation trouble you. He could see Daniel was bothered. So now he has emotional intelligence, right? Daniel's taught him some more things. He can see by looking on Daniel's face, he knows him. He's just not some random stranger who works in the university anymore. Nebuchadnezzar knows this man, and he can see that he's troubled, and he says, listen, Belteshazzar, I don't want you to be worried. You go on, tell me. Tell me what it means. I understand. And Belteshazzar answered, and listen how he speaks to him, my lord, the dream be to them that hate you, and the interpretation thereof to your adversaries. Right? That's an interesting tone of deference in Daniel's voice there. Verse 24, this is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which is come upon my lord, the king. I think you'll see in a minute, brothers and sisters, Daniel isn't doing this because he's obligated to speak to Nebuchadnezzar this way. He's doing it out of genuine deference for this man. Verse 27, this is a beautiful one, this. We thought about this briefly the other day. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you, and break off your sins by righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. It may be a lengthening of your tranquility. I can tell you, brothers and sisters, with some degree of personal certainty, which doesn't mean much, but there you go. Sounds good. That there was nobody else in Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom who had the guts to tell Nebuchadnezzar to stop sinning and start being kinder to the poor. You didn't speak to Nebuchadnezzar like that, and keep your life. And Daniel says to him, listen, O king, I hope my counsel is acceptable to you, but I strongly advise you humble yourself, you break off your sins, and you start acknowledging the power and the might of the God of Israel in whose hands you find yourself. And there was nobody. I can imagine some of the captains of the armed forces, grimacing in the background as they heard Daniel give his recommendations to the king. Nobody spoke, brothers and sisters, to Nebuchadnezzar like that. Well, let's move on to the next chap that Daniel found himself working for, who was Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. And will you keep a finger with me in Daniel and come back with me to Jeremiah again, this time to chapter 27, because Daniel knew exactly who was going to be on the throne when Babylon reached its end. So Daniel would have been preparing for this moment that happens in Daniel chapter 5, wouldn't he? He would have been keeping record because he was a good astronomer, and he knew that all nations would serve the king of Babylon for 70 years. So if he was going to mark it off on his calendar, first of all, he would have had to carve it into a piece of clay or something, wouldn't he? And then he would have had to start marking it off year by year for 70 years to make sure he knew, because God is consistent like the stars of heaven. And it's a long time to wait. It's a long time to make 70 crosses on a calendar, waiting for this day to come, right? And Daniel would have known a little bit about this moment when it happened, because in Jeremiah 27, we read, I think, these verses a little earlier in the week. Pick it up in verse 5. I have made the earth, the man and the beast that are upon the ground, by my great power and by my outstretched arm, and I have given it unto whom it seemed meet unto me. And now I have given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, my servant. The beasts of the field have I given him also to serve him, and all nations shall serve him, and his son, and his son's son, until the very time of his land come, and then many nations and great kings will serve themselves of him. So Daniel knew that the man who was going to be on the throne when Babylon fell was going to be Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. God was very specific in that prophecy 70 years earlier. And Daniel knew those needed to be the conditions. Now, historians tell us, for what it's worth, that Belshazzar wasn't really the king at all. Nebuchadnezzar's son-in-law was, who was Nabonidus. And Nabonidus wasn't around very much. He was a military man, so he left Belshazzar in charge on occasions. So Daniel even knew that it would have to be a period when Nabonidus wasn't around when Babylon was going to fall. This prophecy was very specific. And so as we begin Daniel chapter 5 then, Daniel would not be surprised, would it, that on this particular occasion things are falling into place, and Babylon, the time has come for Babylon to come to an end. Just keep a finger in Daniel chapter 5, because it's worth just noting the dates given in the beginning of Daniel chapter 7 and Daniel chapter 8. Because what's really interesting, brothers and sisters, Daniel is never referred to by a prophet except one man. There's only one person in the entire of Scripture, I believe, that refers to Daniel as a prophet, and that was the Lord Jesus Christ. I don't think anybody else around particularly would have referred to Daniel as the prophet. This was the plaque outside his office door, and prophet wasn't on the list. Because, of course, for the last 50 years or so, Daniel hasn't received one vision himself, apart from those he asked to be revealed to him when Nebuchadnezzar got his. Nebuchadnezzar is the one getting visions. Now, I don't know whether Daniel has been given other visions by God or other revelations. The only revelations Daniel has got are the ones he's reading from his contemporaries and the ones Nebuchadnezzar has received. And the moment Nebuchadnezzar is off the scene, Daniel now starts getting visions. So in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 1, the prophecy of Daniel 7 comes in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Daniel had a dream. First dream we know Daniel ever had. And he doesn't get it until the first year of Belshazzar. Chapter 8, in the third year of the reign of Belshazzar, A vision appeared unto me, even me, Daniel, who appeared to me at the first. And it's almost as if Daniel's saying to God, come on, Nebuchadnezzar's not around anymore. I know Belshazzar ain't going to be getting any visions. So come on, what's going on? And that would have made the prophecy of Daniel 7 significantly later in time. Even though we saw the lovely correlations there between those two visions, significantly later, decades later, than Daniel chapter 2 that had been given directly to Nebuchadnezzar himself. So it's a testimony to Belshazzar as well, isn't it? That Belshazzar didn't get any dreams. No dreams, no visions. Belshazzar only gets tellings off, which you're about to read now. So, Daniel chapter 5 and verse 1. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. And Belshazzar, while he was tasting the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes and his wives and his concubines might drink therein. Now this incident, brothers and sisters, is marked out here as one of the most sacrilegious things a man could have done. Even Nebuchadnezzar, a man like that, had never dared, because he understood, right, the significance and the value those vessels had, especially to Daniel. Right? Never would have dreamed drinking out of them. And Belshazzar says, I know what, let's go and get all those fancy things out of the vault, and let's drink from those. Yeah? And they didn't do it just because they looked nice. You know, it's not like when you're a kid and you look in the cupboard and Mom's got all these nice things that, I don't know, when are these ever going to come out? They're for a special occasion, she used to say to me, but I never witnessed that special occasion in my entire life, right? And now, annoyingly, they sit in my cupboards waiting for that same special occasion that will never come. It wasn't that. That wasn't the reason Belshazzar gets them out the cupboard. Verse 3, they brought the golden vessels that were taken from the temple of the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his princes and his wives and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver and of brass and of iron and of wood and of stone. They did them in mockery. And it does seem, doesn't it, there's just suggesting here in the chapter that Belshazzar did know the vision of Daniel 2, right? It had been taught if you'd have been forced, like Belshazzar probably was, to go through the Babylonian education program. Daniel was the head of faculty. He would have taught history, right? And he would have taught politics. And he would have told the kids what was going to come next, right? There's a view of geopolitics as to what's going to happen next. And the Medo-Persians are on the way. And Belshazzar would have been through the school, wouldn't he? And he'd have heard the stories and the lessons from the man of Judah. Or certainly his friends and his lecturers. And in defiance and in mockery of those things, he gets out these vessels and begins to drink from them. And the party very quickly comes to a rather sudden end. In the same hour, verse 5, it was this act that triggered the event. In the same hour came forth the fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And in verse 6, we get what happens to the king. His countenance were changed, his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against the other. How embarrassing for Belshazzar that for all time his knocking knees are recorded in Daniel chapter 5. He was so terrified his knees were audibly knocking together. Now, the funny thing is, brothers and sisters, as Daniel is invited into this banqueting hall, he knew the scene he was going to see because Belshazzar's knocking knees had been prophesied about before, right? Let's go and take a look at it. Jeremiah chapter 51. The only thing I think Daniel didn't know was what method God was going to deploy to bring about this reaction in Belshazzar, but he knew exactly who it was going to be, and he knew what his reaction was going to be. Jeremiah chapter 51 and verse 7. Listen to this. And listen to the relevance and the resonance of this prophecy that Daniel would have known. Babylon has been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunk. The nations have drunk of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Howl for her, take balm for her pain. If so be, she may be healed. We would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her and let us go, every one into her own country. For her judgment reaches up to heaven and is lifted up, even up to the skies. The Lord has brought forth our righteousness. Come and let us declare in Zion the work of the Lord our God. So here it is. Here is the Lord holding, as Belshazzar holds the golden cups in his hands, the Lord is holding the golden cup of Babylon in his hands, right? And now he's going to loose the loins of the king. And there's a lovely play on words here, actually, in Daniel chapter 5. Just have a look at it. Where it says here in Daniel chapter 5 and verse 6, the thoughts of Belshazzar's head troubled him so that the joints of his loins were loosed. It's not a very nice description, that, is it? The joints of his loins were loosed. When the Queen Mother comes in to give him a bit of a dressing down, listen to the description she gives of Daniel in verse 12. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in the same Daniel. That phrase there, the dissolving of doubts, is the same two words as the joints being loosed. Daniel has the ability to undo knots, right? In the same way God has undone the knots of Belshazzar's loins. So Daniel can undo knots as well, right? Lovely play on words here with what's taking place. And if you look in Isaiah 45, that's one of the verses I was looking for. Isaiah 45. Sorry, I forgot which one it was. It's the Cyrus passage, which is super interesting in the context. Cyrus's army about to enter Babylon. Isaiah 45 verse 1. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him. And I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates. And the gates will not be shut, and I will go before thee, and make the crooked places straight, and will break in pieces the gates of brass, and cut in sunder the bars of iron, and I will give you the treasures of darkness, and so on and so on. So this prophecy of Cyrus' conquest of Babylon, right, is connected with the loins of the kings being loosed. And that's what God is doing now to Belshazzar. And it's as if Daniel wants you to know this is the fulfillment of Isaiah 45. The loins of the king have been loosed, and the army of Cyrus is about to march its way into Babylon. And so poor Belshazzar now, he gets properly humiliated in front of all the thousands of his lords, first of all by his mom, in verse 10 of Daniel chapter 5. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Don't let your thoughts trouble you. She's quoting there, I think. Nor let your countenance be changed. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, your father, the king, your father, made master of the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers, because an excellent spirit, and knowledge, and understanding, and interpreting of dreams, and showing of hard sentences, and dissolving of doubts were found in him. Now let the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar, let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. And you can almost hear what his mom says, isn't you? Boy, did you not have the right people giving you guidance on this job. How did you get yourself in this pickle? And I'll tell you why, she says, because there's a man in your kingdom who made sure your father, your grandfather, didn't find himself in this spot. And I suggest you go and call him, and whatever you do, use the right name. Right? Now, you contrast, brothers and sisters, with how Daniel spoke to Nebuchadnezzar now, with how Daniel speaks to Belshazzar as he's called into this feast. Let's look down here. Well, I've heard of you, says Belshazzar in verse 14, that the spirit of the gods is in you, and light and wisdom and understanding. And now the wise men and so on, they've not been able to show the interpretation. And I've heard of you that you can make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me the interpretation, you'll be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold about your neck, and you'll be the third ruler in the kingdom. That was very generous, wasn't it? Daniel spent the last 50 years being ruler of the province of Babylon, and Belshazzar thinks it's a cool offer to make him third in the land if he can answer the dream, right? Answer the writing on the wall. And there's a reason, of course, why Belshazzar offers him third place, because he's not even in first place himself. He's already second in command, and so he offers Daniel third place. There's a hint, we don't have time to look at it, brothers and sisters, that actually Nabonidus left Daniel in charge anyway. In Daniel chapter 8, in the third year of Belshazzar, Daniel says in his own vision, I was on the king's business. Well, according to this chapter, the king has no business with Daniel. And I put it to you, brothers and sisters, Nabonidus left Daniel a note on his desk before he went off and said, would you keep an eye on Belshazzar? Right? So, here it comes. Verse 17, Daniel answered and said before the king, you keep your gifts and you give your rewards to somebody else. That's the starting point. However, I will read the writing and make it known to the king, but not before I give you a dressing down. O king, the Most High God, verse 18, gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom, majesty, glory, and honor. For the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would he slew, whom he would he kept alive, and whom he would he raised up, and whom he would he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne. They took his glory from him, and he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, his dwelling with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdoms of men and appoints over it whomsoever he will. And you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. You've lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven, and they've brought the vessels of his house before you. And you and your lords and your wives and your concubines have drunk wine in them. You've praised the gods of silver and gold and brass and iron and wood and stone, which can't see or hear or know. And the God in whose hand your breath is, and whose are all your ways, have you not glorified. Whew. That was a bit embarrassing, wasn't it? And can you imagine how Daniel felt, brothers and sisters, as he walked into that banqueting hall and saw those beautiful golden vessels from the temple of his God in Jerusalem in the hands of a man like Belshazzar? And so he reads the writing on the wall, right? Mene, mene, tekel upharsin. They were the words that had been written there on the wall. And the crazy thing is, brothers and sisters, I need to speed up, sorry. The crazy thing is, this was the least complicated sentence anybody had ever seen written on the wall, and none of the magicians or astrologers could read it or give the interpretation. And Daniel says, well, all that God has written on the wall is a mina, a shekel, and some halves. It's just like a grocery list, right? It's some money. You think you're so valuable, Belshazzar. This is what God thinks. A mina, a shekel, and some halves. And of course, those words, they were nouns, but they also had meaning, right? And so Daniel gives the meaning. The idea of the mina it literally means as a word to number. God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. The shekel means to weigh. So Daniel just said, well, you know what shekel means, right? It means to weigh. And he changes the last word from Upharsin to Perez. Upharsin means some halves and is a plural word. Perez is singular. Your kingdom is divided. And Perez is the word from which the word Persia is taken. Divided, right? Your kingdom is divided. Oh yes, right now, tonight, and given to the Medes and Persians. And of course, that very night, brothers and sisters, as you know, Babylon falls and Belshazzar is slain. Now, here's the funny thing. As Darius the Mede marches into the banqueting hall, let's take a look at it, verse 30. In that night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Now that's interesting, isn't it? We're given his age. Darius was 62 years old. Quite an experienced general, right? Why are we told his age? I don't know. But as he walks into the banqueting hall at Belshazzar's feast, he looks around and he says, well, who's in charge? And if you read verse 29, then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and they put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. So that night, as Darius the Mede walks into Belshazzar's banqueting hall, he looks around and he says, who's in charge? And there's a 90-year-old man standing there wearing the purple robe and the golden chain of office. And Darius walks up to him and says, who are you? And he says, I'm Daniel from the tribe of Judah, and I appear to be in charge. Right? And I'm pretty sure Darius was pretty impressed with that at 62 years old, to meet a man somewhat older than him. And I'll tell you what was more impressive, brothers and sisters. I believe Darius knew all about Daniel. And he got down on his knees and he'd say, oh, I've been waiting to meet you. Right? And I'm pretty sure Daniel would have said, I got some things I need to tell you too. Right? And we will discover what those things were tomorrow.